Welcome to our very first exclusive episode, since the first episode was on our podcast, of Our Chaotic Cauldron, the mouthful. Mm-hmm. I am your host, Alyssa Lilly, as you know.
And I am Tara Webb.
And today we're going to be talking about the Allfather.
Yes. And it ties in with what we chatted about with Father Christmas and Santa Claus and that kind of thing, which is why we thought this would be a great place to kind of just jump into our mystic area. As we've stated many times, we are not experts by any means. And I think it's beautiful within Norse mythology, and I think a lot of mythologies, is that you don't kind of have to be experts to at least practice. Like, you can still just, connect with Odin or any other deity, however it works with you. So the information that we're giving is from, sources that we've gone through. We would love to go through the poetic Edda and the prose Edda, because that's like going back to the exact place. But that's also like reading the Bible, because of just how big it is and how it's written and that kind of thing. So I'm coming to you from two books that I have. And I think, Alyssa, where'd you get your info?
There were a couple of books that I looked into that I had. We have a whole library section of just all things Norse and Greek and just that whole genre. So I just kind of went through a couple different books there. And then, of course, Google and doing some searches there. And then we're also part of a community that I went and looked at as well that talks a lot about Norse mythology. And what's it called?
The community?
Where you wear the hammer.
I don't remember.
It's like it's like being a witch, but you're not a witch. There's a word for it for if you practice.
Mm-hmm.
That's gonna drive me nuts.
You kind of get like different, not titles, but like if you're a woman per se, even though I think they have other titles for like AFABs, or maybe those are like transition or something. But if you're a woman and identify as that as well, you can come in as a battle maiden, is what it's called, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember what the guys are called, because I just wasn't me.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know.
We're just exploring, seeing what this is about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Odin. One, I will say, it's so interesting seeing him in in three different lights. One, of like doing research. Two, of your own personal connection with him, like my personal connection with Odin. And I'm sure Alyssa has their own. Maybe not.
Yeah. I do. It's just I feel like with Odin and me, I picture him as he's very similar to the way that Christianity depicts God, and so I feel like there's a weird. I'm not ready for it yet.
Yeah. And then the latter being like, Marvel Odin, or Odin that is out there in the world, like Thor and Loki, like those that we see that are just caricatures of the original kind of thing. And, every time I tell my husband that Loki is not Thor's brother, that's actually not true. He's actually Odin's blood brother. I kind of consider Loki a they more so. That's like my personal opinion. I think a lot of people actually agree with me that kind of study with Loki and stuff. But technically, if you want to go like word wise, I guess. But that's Loki's Odin's blood brother. I think it was, I remember who Loki came through. That's like a whole other topic, but it's interesting seeing those correlations and like how they are very different. Loki still calls Ragnarok, so don't worry. Or like helps along with it or whatever.
Ragnarok's an interesting topic. It's so hard because I feel like we're doing this series at a time that I know I mentioned this in one of our podcast episodes where we're playing God of War, and the newest one takes place with, Allfather and Odin and Loki and all these different characters. And it's an interesting, because it's like some parts they try to keep it close to lore, and then other parts definitely aren't. And so it almost skews your perception a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that I got one of the books I'm reading / is where I got also knowledge is the Norse mythology from Neil Gaiman. And
hey, that's one of the books I think that I was looking at.
His is obviously he's a fiction writer, but he sees mythology as like, fiction, and so he writes it through fiction, but also like the truth of what it was, right? Because it's a myth per se. So it's interesting reading that, and like it's as close to what you would think is possible, but also you can't truly know at all.
What is knowing a god like?
Well, I will say, and I feel like it's something we've discussed before, that I feel like within each mythology or each area with multiple deities, that they are all comprised of one universe per se, right? So if you look at within the Christian modality, there being God, which is actually not God's name, right? Because that is a God, it'd be Yahweh. And then you kind of look into like the beliefs of like there being multiple gods within that. That's like a whole other topic, but basically saying like within Norse mythology, Odin, Freyja, Loki, Balder, all of those are different pieces of consciousness within the universe, within the Yahweh version of like just being one God, right? Like they're all, Yahweh technically has all of those things. Within Hinduism, like, Shakti is the main energy and like that kind of thing. And they all are combined within that and just pieces of it that were easier, I believe, to explain than like, this is all one big thing because it helps us attach as humans.
So like personification of the different pieces of the whole.
We see tons of lightning. That's got to be a god. That's Thor, right? And Thor is these other things that connect with it. Versus lightning comes from this and from that and that and that, and it's the whole just universe being together.
So where do you think Odin came from?
I mean, if you look at like how Odin is, the god in a sense, like the top god, like Zeus per se, that would be maybe the equivalent of like consciousness, creating things. But then again, Odin has two brothers, I think, Holdor and I don't remember the other one, who helped create the rest of the world, etc. And so I see it like Zeus. But then again, whereas Zeus is just like this misogynistic god to me, even more so, like, just not that Odin probably didn't go around and mess with people, like women and sex and stuff. I don't know how much of that because you don't read much of that. Zeus did. Like, Zeus has tons of children. Whereas Odin put a huge emphasis on wisdom. Not saying he wasn't like the other, like, did other philandering things.
I feel like in his stories, he pursues wisdom to such an extent that it's almost a fault. Yeah.
I mean, for example, the one that we talk about, or we're going to talk about, is, he literally gives one of his eyes for wisdom. So it's like, and then again, his eyesight is like amazing. He could see across the entire Midgard and just see everything. So maybe he really only needed one because his sight was more than just like physical sight. But when he saw this water that was full of just all this bountiful, I guess wisdom is what he thought, because there was one Jotun which was like a giant, a troll kind of, constantly drinking from it and like not wild. He wanted that, and so he gave up an eye. The guy's like, yeah, but you have to give me something. Like, you have to give me your eyesight. And so he just did it. He's like, here's one. Get the knife and take it out. And the guy drops the eye into the bottom of the well so he can see all of the earth, Midgard, or something, all of like what's going on. But then Odin supposedly has like all this wisdom from there on. He's the wisest god. That is what he attained to be. Whereas like in Greek, that would be Athena.
Yeah. So fascinating how the different personifications of that one piece could be, because those are very different. Like Athena and Odin give me very different energy.
But if we're going to jump a little bit to Athena, Athena is birthed out of Zeus's brain, his mind. So technically it's like, because Zeus is like, Athena's the only goddess who has not come from another quote unquote woman, female goddess. She's birthed from a male's mind because it's wisdom.
There's a lot we could go in. We're
There is.
on that for later.
We're gonna go back to
I have a
Odin.
lot of thoughts on that.
I know, right? But yeah, I think just his pursuit of wisdom, and I would say, honestly, love of the other gods. I feel like he has... My connection with Odin is very loving. He's, essentially the bard. He's the storyteller. He would shapeshift into that going as a traveler. He would share stories about, basically, I don't know, the storyteller writes the story. So, he told the people what he wanted them to believe, probably. But he also just loved telling stories, and that's how these stories got passed down along, is that he would, just go and be with them. And so I've always kind of connected with him in that kind of way. I've never really read, Alyssa, I don't know what you think, I've never read anything really negative about him. Just Zeus things. I don't know. That sounds bad, but
I don't know. It's so hard because I feel like I have such a negative view of Odin only because of my experiences with, like I said, with the Christianity version of God, and they're just very similar. And my mind, when you talk about being the storyteller and telling people what he wants them to believe, my brain goes manipulation. He's manipulating people to believe what he wants, but he's not a bad guy. I don't know why my brain just writes him as a bad guy. I mean,
because that's the way you've connected the male deity too, especially higher, the upper deity.
Yeah. So that's more of a personal thing for me. I could not think of anything. I think more of the things that I have read about him that I would consider, I'm going to put air quotes, negative, is just the self-mutilation. Cutting out the eye, hanging himself for 7 days for what? For more wisdom about something, or for knowledge about
magic.
Something.
He I want this magic, and Freyja was the only one who had it, I think.
Does magic really come at that cost? What, you know what I mean?
Because
it makes you ask.
Only female deities are, even then there's a certain word, if that's an even deeper rabbit hole down another area, that could access it. And it was upside down to, and I guess it makes you wonder if is that how wisdom comes in general, through such pain?
Well, was he hung upside down, or did he hang for 7 days? Because I feel like it's not really clear in some of the sources if he was actually
I thought he was hung upside down.
I think it's up for interpretation. I don't know. I have to go and look. This is where we need to get into the poetic etiquette, but you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Because I think that is unclear whether he was upside down or just hung.
I'm kind of looking up a little bit really quickly.
I feel like I picture upside down, but then I correlate that to the hanged man. I feel like tarot kind of, I don't know why that's where my brain goes when I think about him hanging himself upside down for 7 days.
But along the way, I think it's very interesting that a lot of these deities, the earlier ones, have to kill their father / parental figure. And granted, we're looking at Greek and Norse specifically, and those two, the other ones being, I don't know, how they are with other mythologies. I haven't really looked into them enough to compare them. But Odin, I think, is the one who essentially initiates getting rid of the Jotun and making everything of the earth out of his paternal figure.
What's his role in Ragnarok again? Do you remember?
Odin's? Mm-hmm. I think he was just fighting, but I don't know.
Is it Odin that kills Freyr? Is that right?
I don't remember.
I'll have to go. I need to go. I know today's not about Ragnarok, but I just can't remember the details on that one.
So the runes were actually from the Norns, not from the Jotuns, like I thought. I thought they were
the runes that he hung himself for?
Yeah. I thought he hung, but he also hung from the Yggdrasil tree, which is in where the Jotuns are. Mm-hmm. So supposedly it said, I know that I hung on a windy tree 9 long nights, wounded with a spear. Who does that sound like? Dedicated
Jesus.
to Odin, myself on that tree of which no man knows from where its roots. So, I mean, I guess it is, unless you go directly to the who adds. I'm just still looking because it's just interesting. Yeah.
What do you mean?
But he was just like how he hung. Because even then, there's a picture of him like being wrapped around the tree like this versus hung. So it's like his arms
that's
were
what
wrapped.
I'm saying. I feel like different people's interpretation, even fictional, right? We could get into like the Marvel or the God of War series, wherever the fictional pieces come in. I feel like it just skews a little bit, and the story of Odin has morphed over time. It's like, even going back to the original text, it's like, I don't know what actually happened.
It's interesting reading a little bit of what was written of like supposedly what he said or what someone said he said as he was hanging on the tree. That's similar to Jesus.
What did he say? Do you have that?
Just, I don't think this was from the Poetic Edda, but this is from what someone wrote. Odin's self-sacrifice. No bread did they give me, nor drink from a horn. Downwards I peered. I took the runes screaming. I took them, then I fell from there. It was like, asking for a little bit of water and like those kinds of things. Or I guess it'd be wine per se.
This is why my relationship with Odin's a little shady. There's so many similarities.
There is, but if you think about it, it's kind of not fair because all of that came from Norse mythology, among other things. Like even Baldur.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Again, it's something that's been skewed and made into its own thing. And
Baldur's the
that's
one who died and
that
rose
I need
again.
to do, not that Odin is terrible.
Yeah, but I mean, like, for example, Baldur's the one who rose again, which is similar to Jesus, right? And so you just see how things are kind of taken. But yeah, that's my connection with Odin. It's just very much of a like understanding, loving perception because he's just kind of there. I've never noticed him to be pressing. And granted, that's a perception of like my connection, right? Anybody else can have their own and it should be entirely different and entirely valid because this is a consciousness, I believe, a consciousness in a sense.
Yeah, I feel like Odin I feel like his energy is very much loving, authoritative father figure. Like a healthy version of that, not like the toxic version of that. But my relationship with father figures has been so tarnished and a lot of abuse, and then of course Christianity pull in religious trauma, that's just like, it's a hard thing to approach.
Because we also talked about within the Santa Claus one that, Odin is the one who went around giving gifts and dressing up very much of like this warm and loving, like, here's something, let me help you. It says whenever he sits on the throne, I don't remember the name of the throne because it was a mouthful. When he sits on the name of the throne, he has 2 wolves that sit at his feet and 2 ravens that are on his shoulders. And when he sits there, the ravens will fly around Midgard and he knows everything because they tell him everything, which is interesting versus like he just knows it. He's told it, which I think is fascinating.
So are the ravens the real wise ones?
I don't know. I wonder because like birds flying around, I think of it as like, here's 2 perspectives and you get to choose the perspective.
Ooh. Like the angel devil metaphor we see a lot.
Or even,
analogy.
even if they saw different things, right? Here's what happened here. Because I'm sure Odin knew this as, he was a storyteller telling people about, whatever he wanted to tell them, but whatever happened. And as they tell that story, it just gradually gets different. We know that with like the telephone game and stuff. And I can only imagine like coming from a raven. And I wonder how well the raven spoke, if he spoke whatever language Odin spoke, or how Odin communicated with the raven. They. So then he had to interpret like what's being said, or was it through sight? Like they were able to communicate and whisper in his ear, but
or
he was able
maybe
to see
telepathically communicate.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm still in love with your idea that his 8-legged horse is a spider.
I don't remember where I heard that, but the idea of, because you don't see spiders anywhere in Norse mythology or in like Odin times and like olden Odin times at all, that kind of thing. But spiders obviously, well, they probably had to exist. It was really cold technically during the times
Yeah,
people
I was going to
worshipped
say
Odin.
they had to have existed, but I wonder what their version of spider is or what they thought it was. You know what I mean?
So technically, Sleipnir, which is the 8-legged horse / spider, in my opinion, is Loki's child. Loki mothered them, which is why I consider like Loki as they, because like literally gave Sleipnir as like a, I don't know the word, not a trophy, but like a, here's something for you.
Like, surprise, I created something amazing.
Well, I mean, it was from them. The Jotuns were attacking the Aesir, and Thor wasn't there, but apparently when they called Thor's name, Thor can just come whenever he's called. And so they tore down this gate of like gold and silver, and so they needed someone to build it, and this, what they thought was a poor old, can't think what he's called, but like a person who builds with stones and like that kind of thing.
Like a stonemason?
Yeah, but there's a different word that was specifically for it. I don't remember what it was.
Okay.
But yeah, I think like a stonemason. And he wanted to build this for them, but his requirement was he wanted Freyja and he wanted the sun and the moon. And they were like, well, no, we can't do this. And so Loki convinced them to like try to trick him. And when it came to when the time was up, the guy basically was going to win. And they were like, we can't give them Freyja and just like have all of darkness. So they said, Loki, fix this. And Loki sends out this beautiful like female horse to attract the guy's male horse away, tricking him. He chases the male horse. And by the time they get back, they're too tired and they don't finish it in time. And it even says, and Odin, like while everyone's celebrating, Odin feared there'd be basically consequences because once again, the Aesir had not kept their promise, had not kept the end of the bargain. And he could already see there being something wrong with that because the guy technically, even though the guy was like cheating because he was a Jotun, he would have kept his end of the bargain. All that to say is later, Loki, this little like 8-legged horse comes running out at some point because Loki had disappeared and they birthed this little 8-legged horse from that interaction. And here you go, you're Sleipnir. You are now Odin's. It was the fastest horse. But like I could see it being a spider. I don't know. It was beautiful.
I kind of want to draw it. Maybe I'll do that later.
I wonder how massive it had to be.
Because Odin wrote it, right? So it had to.
Yeah. I think he rode it across the sky? Maybe not. I know he had a sleigh that was pulled by one of his horses. And that's really the idea of like Santa Claus that we talked about. But I feel like I think Sleipnir came after that. What is interesting though is that even though Odin and Zeus, and like that's my knowledge right there of those two to be able to compare, are these like almighty gods, and like all these other gods are almighty technically, right? They can still die because obviously Baldur was killed and they came back to life. They do not own per se life and death, essentially. They don't own fate because there were 3 in both of them, I think, both mythologies, where the fates essentially wove strands into people's lives of like how their life would be, and even the gods were subject
at the mercy
to
of the fates, yeah.
Which is fascinating to me because these gods are supposed to be like these almighty things. So within that idea of consciousness, of like, we then look at is that. You could say it predestination, right? Things are going to be this way. I don't tend to think that because I feel like things have constantly changed for me, but then again, I'm not a fate who like looks down on things. I think the fates were the there's a word. I'm looking for my book really quickly. I don't see it in here.
It makes me think, I feel like because, you always visualize them with all of these strings of fate. And I feel like, not to jump into timeline jumping, but it's almost like that's when you feel the fate, like, switching your outcome. Like, oh, we're going to switch it up here.
Yeah. And I think there's a word, I cannot think of what it is for the life of me at the moment, where it's like the magic, where you were able to kind of see those things, see the fate, and like, or see the lines of fate and like that kind of thing.
Is that not Satyr?
Thank you. I just couldn't think of the word. It is Satyr.
Oh, yeah, Satyr magic. Yeah.
And that's what we were talking about earlier when I said I couldn't remember the word either. Because only those who are satyrs or say, I don't know what the title is for the person who actually practices it, which was Freyja. She was that, and Odin technically couldn't be that because he was male, and that's why he wanted the rune so badly, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe there's a little bit of ego and like masculinity of, well, I have to have this because I'm the almighty and it has to be this way kind of thing. I can see that. But I mean, technically being able to look within Satyr magic, you're able to see those lines and see how you can shift them. So I think that's my perception of that's kind of being like one of the fate, or able to understand the fate. I don't know. Fates.
It's fascinating. Satyr magic's always fascinated me. And it feels really powerful. And I can see why Odin would want that, because it's more knowledge, it's more wisdom to know exactly how everything's going to play out and what the fate in the design of the universe is.
Especially with the divination tools, runes. Because I don't know if, technically I don't know if like having all the wisdom, you would be able to divine what would happen, even if you are God. And divination is like an entry point into that through runes or cards or whatever, right? It gives you a perception of where to go, or at least that's kind of like what people think.
Yeah, I feel like divination is hard, even diving into Satyr magic and things like this, because if you're going to, and this is all theory, of course, if you're going to see what's going to happen in the future, there are so many choices between now and then that can change what that looks like. So it's like you're getting a snapshot of that in your current timeline and the timeline of everybody involved in that outcome.
And that's what's interesting is like when I was reading a little bit of the Satyr book that I have that I don't like a lot, one of the things it's saying was basically this person can have this, the next thing that happens to them or the next few things can be really, really dark and awful, or they can be really, really good. And if you let someone choose that, they're most likely going to choose the good things. But then when you have to look further out, like see how they actually impact everything, that really good time could lead to a much worse and like more terrible outcome later, or the reverse, right? And so it's not just like, oh, I get all this money. Like, how does that money come? How are you within that timeline? And looking at, not just looking at like one aspect of it, it's like literally having to look at everything within that line. And like you said, how it affects other people within it. Because if it shifts for one person, it has to shift for, if not all others, quite a few. I would think for all, but that's also my knowledge.
It's hard to wrap your mind around, for sure. I think about stuff like this all the time. Like butterfly effect and just all these different things. It's just, everything is so intricate and interwoven. And feels like one consciousness just kind of split out into so many different parts. We talk about that with the gods, but even with people, you are a part of the universe. We're all a part of the universe, and we're all almost like a representation of a small piece of that. That's
why some people say that if there's bad, evil out there in the world, it's because it's still in me somewhere. In the reverse, there's good out there. Like people say, and I learned this from Mia Magick, that be the change you want, right? Like you envision the world you want. And so if there's someone that's still killing out there, where is it in your heart that you sometimes wish somebody weren't here, that somebody were dead. Even if you didn't do anything about it, like, you still have those thoughts of like, God, you just, but like the anger that immediately can be, come out of
that triggers me. I don't like that, because it's almost like blaming you for that person killing people. I feel like that's I don't know. That feels
that also like ties into like your statement about all of us are consciousness. All of us are technically one. It is triggering. Yes. You're right.
Yes, yeah, it's very triggering.
because then we pull back and we're like more in the human world of like, but that's blaming. That's, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we don't ever want to take that blame away. In the human world, no, we don't. In consciousness in the universe, I don't know.
I mean, I've thought about killing people. I won't lie. Not that I would ever act on it, but we've been in like hurtful situations and things like that.
When someone hurts my kid, even if it's another kid, my immediate reaction is to want to go pummel them. I'm not going to.
But the urge is there.
It is. I also think it's fascinating whenever and this is kind of my issue with the Christian God sometimes, perception of Christian God, is our human emotions placed on the gods. Well, they are quick to anger, and they are, this and this, and like all these human perceptions of how we understand them, so we've limited them to this, because it's our perception. We can't understand how a God, a universe, a consciousness would actually really be. It is inside of us, I believe that. So like we could probably I truly think it's all out of love. Just love. Therefore, it's anger out of love sometimes. But then it goes in the other part of well, are you acting out of it's like this little tangent of things. Because, the Christian God is quick to anger, in the beginning, got mad at, whatever was happening, and this is my wrath, right? Odin, I don't necessarily see having, I know Zeus had quick to anger. That's why I think it's so different with Odin in some ways, because I don't, and maybe because technically he's an older belief. He's one of the more original beliefs. I won't say original. I think that's more of, where does Shakti come from? I don't remember. The Shakti energy.
Where does Shakti come from?
Yeah, what belief would that be? You could say Buddhism, but I feel like it's even further past that. But with that...
Wouldn't that be Hinduism or no?
Yes, but I would say even further in the sense of those terms, Buddhism and Hinduism are technically religions that have adopted what's already been there. So where they would originally have come from even before that, I don't know the name. It's for Norse, that's one of the oldest beliefs.
I see what you're saying.
I do believe whatever belief was with the Shakti before, Hinduism and Buddhism, possibly was before that, because I think of Mesopotamia and that kind of thing, but my knowledge is very limited in that area. All of that being said, even as it's getting written down, our human beliefs, change. I can't think of her name. It's one of the Shakti components of how she's it's Sita's wife essentially. Just this demure and wonderful wife and all that kind of stuff. But maybe it is Sita, maybe that's her name, but she's more than that. And it's just the perception of human masculine patriarchy as well, on top of what these goddesses should be and act like when. Yeah, that's a whole other tangent of why you can be divinely inspired, but also you essentially take your own beliefs within that as well.
I mean, we're always going to have an ego filter. It's always going to be there. It is what it is. We have our own interpretations. It's my relationship with you is completely different than Justin's relationship with you, which is completely different than your son's relationship with you. So it's just...
Even each
everybody's going to form that. Yeah, each child, every person's relationship with you is going to be different. And it's the same thing with deities and gods and religions and beliefs. We're all going to form a different relationship with it. And so that is going to come through our interpretation.
And it's also based on their connections and relationships with other people that have been influenced and forced.
My relationship with Odin is a prime example. He didn't do anything to me. And like I said, reading, he didn't have anything he's done wrong, but my brain is morphed and I get to unpack and deal with my own shit before I'm hey, what's up?
I think you also connect with Odin because of me too. Whereas I kind of connect with Loki because of you in some ways, even though Loki
I think so too. We've talked about that a lot, where like you feel like Loki just passes by sometimes. I feel like that.
Yeah,
with
Loki
Odin,
was like, "Here you go, here's hell. Okay, I'm gone." It's like, okay, thanks, Loki.
Thanks. I feel like Odin pops up for me. His energy, and it's just like I'll be sitting there doing something, and then I'll be doing something I know I shouldn't be doing, and I feel like I feel
which is why you don't like him be there, because it's like the father figure.
He's like, this is not serving your greatest good, and then he leaves, and I'm just like, fuck, okay, got it.
Whereas I think Loki be like, do it.
Yeah, exactly. And
it's very. He'd be like, fucking find out. Like that's how Loki is. Like, okay, you see that it screwed you over. Cool, you figured it out. You got it.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like Loki is very much of you got to learn from the experience versus being told what you should do.
But I do think Odin also thinks you should learn, but also doesn't want you to get hurt.
Yes, it's very different.
It's like I see you. Go ahead and do it, because I also did some fucked up shit, like my eye. But also know it really hurts, because as a parent, quote unquote parent, I want to protect from that.
Yeah. Look, he's like, get burned. It's fun.
I'll do it with you.
Yes. I feel like Loki is the embodiment of truly basking in your current experience, whether that's as a human or whatever form you're in, right? Really basking in the full complexity of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And not just trying to do the right thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Because, we do get caught up on the right thing a lot.
Mm-hmm. Or what we should be doing. The shoulds.
Mm-hmm. Technically, I shouldn't be pursuing a connection with Hela, if you want to call her Hela, but Hell.
Why?
Because that's the underworld. That's like Hades, and that's the devil. Like that kind of thing, right? It's the dark areas. That's the should not things. In reality, we all have that inside of us.
Yeah. Light, dark, it's all part of you.
It's all in it. Yep. It's all part of our consciousness.
Thank you for joining our TED Talk.
Do we have a challenge? I couldn't pause. Do we
doing challenges for the Chaotic Cauldron? Go learn about Odin. Follow your curiosities.
Don't burn yourself with Loki. No, please don't.
It could be fun, just saying. From personal experience, also be careful. Well, thank you for sitting with us as we dive into this. I feel like this series is a really good way for us to explore all of the magical things and myths and lore and learn, and who knows, in a few years we may do another one on Odin and it be completely different as we learn more and grow and read original texts and things. But
this will show you the example of us getting out of comfort zones and not entirely knowing what we're talking about. Like we know what we're talking about, but also we don't. So it encourages you to jump into just, I don't know what I'm doing. Have some
knowledge. We're not Odin experts.
But we have some knowledge.
Yeah, this is our Chaotic Cauldron where we're just diving and dipping our toe in and discussing what we're learning and how we feel about it.
Definitely.
So we'll see you guys next month.